Hello everybody. Today we're going to be doing a backsplash in a kitchen. The homeowners here are doing an extensive kitchen remodel. So they removed all the cabinets. They tried to remove the backsplash tile, but it damaged the sheetrock. So basically we're going to have to cut out the sheetrock here where the old backsplash was, replace the new sheetrock. We're going to get it taped with fiberglass tape and just do one coat over it because they are doing a tile backsplash over it, so it doesn't have to be perfect. If you weren't doing a tile backsplash and you're going to just leave it drywall, so you'd probably have to do 2 or 3 coats on this at least and just leave it smooth, or you can try to match the texture. We got lucky here though because the cabinets are all removed below, above, so it makes it easier to do. If you had to try to cut this out with cabinets in the place, then it turns into extra large job because you have to mask off the cabinets. You're going to have to sawzall right below the cabinet line above the granite, so it turns into a big job if your cabinets are in place. But this is a simple video, and just basically watch and learn. Get it all cut out. Easy way to cut out area to mark it, squares. Just measure it, maybe do a chalk line or use a level and just pencil it off. The top part of this is right at the 4-foot seam, so it broke off easy for us. But the bottom part, we're going to chalk line and just sawzall it. Sawzalling is kind of aggressive, so you might want to use a razor or a hand saw. But a sawzall, if you do use a sawzall, don't go all the way through the sheetrock because you don't know what's behind the wall. There could be wires, pipes, anything. So if you do sawzall, just set the sawzall or don't do depth more than a 1/2 inch because most sheetrock's 1/2 inch. But basically get the area all cut out nice and square. Pull all your nails, all your screws. On the outside edges of the sheetrock, always add screws to tighten up the old sheetrock. Take your measurements. Cut your new sheetrock. And on this one, it has a lot of light boxes. So you want to either mark out your light boxes and cut them out on the new sheetrock by measuring the center from the sides and then the center from either the top or bottom. Cut out your square boxes or round boxes. On this one, we're just taking basic measurements, and then he's going to use a roto zip. I don't recommend using a roto zip unless you used one before. They kind of get out of hand. They're not as easy to use as most people think because they do go off course. So sometimes it's easier just to cut out each box one by one. Basically, get all the sheetrock installed, all your boxes cut out, everything looks nice. Add plenty of screws to make it tight. Even though this is getting covered with tile, you still want to add a lot of screws. And then with this one, we're just going to do a pre-fill. I'm going to pre-fill the gaps after I scrape all the edges with the 6-inch knife. I'm going to just do a pre-fill with the 20-minute. And while the pre-fill is still damp, I'm going to follow through with a fiberglass mesh tape to tape over it. So basically the wet pre-fill holds the tape in place. Wipe it down. And then I'm going to follow through and do a first coat over everything. I'm using a hot mud. Like you know on most of my videos, I say if you don't use hot muds or you don't mud a lot, just use a regular all-purpose joint compound. All-purpose joint compounds would have to dry overnight. So if you did do a pre-fill with a joint compound, you'd have to let it dry before you coat over it. So we're just going to get a nice heavy first coat on this with the 20-minute. We're going to let it set up, and then we're just going to slick it out. And if need be, we can touch it up, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, it's getting tiled over again. They just need this done before they install the cabinets, and that way they can continue on with their kitchen remodel. Demoing out and all this is really dirty, so if you have finished floors or something, you definitely want to put down plastic. Here they have raw concrete, so it's good for us. Just put down a tarp, sweep up our mess, clean it up, and call it a day. But this is just a basic backsplash. You might have tile in your house, in your kitchen, and you say, hey, I want to remove that old tile. Well, you'll see this video, and you might change your mind, or you might think it's easier than you thought. When in doubt, hire a professional, because this is even a big job for us to do. All right, all the sheetrock's hung. Your next step, you're going to tape and coat. But before you can tape anything, you want to go through with your 6-inch knife and scrape everything. You need to do this on all repair work, especially when you're tying in new sheetrock to old sheetrock. On the top part here is a tape seam, the 4-foot tape seam. So you want to try to dig out that old tape. You don't want to mud over this. If it's really stubborn, won't come out, then yeah, you're just going to tape over it and mud over it. But if you're able to get that seam out and that old tape out, go ahead and dig it out. It's a little tedious. You got to work with your 6-inch knife. Also, you're getting rid of any goobers. Running your 6-inch knife, you might have a nail sticking out or a screw sticking out. So you'll hit that screw, then you'll know you need to set the screw in and recess the screw. But scrape everything, gets the goobers out, everything ready. That way when you go to tape, the tape sits on nice and flat. You're not going over humps and whatever you left on there because you didn't take the time to scrape it. There's gaps here, so I'm going to do a pre-fill technique. I'm using a hot mud here. Hot muds, like I said in most of my videos, is more professional grade material. I have to use these hot muds because I have to finish the job in one trip. So if you want to mix hot mud and pre-fill it, you just be warned that hot mud does set up and you get what you pay for with hot muds. It sets up like a cement, so it's more of a professional grade material. So if you have plenty of time, just use a regular all-purpose joint compound. All-purpose joint compounds have to dry overnight. With that, you would just pre-fill it. You'd have to let it dry. Then you can turn around and put the tape on, or you can just put the fiberglass tape. But with this hot mud, I'm just using a 20-minute, and I'm basically striking in all the areas where the tape's going to go, and I'm pushing the mud inside. Pre-filling, getting that mud inside the gap. You could have taped over it, but we have time here, so we're just going to get everything a nice pre-fill technique. Or you could have just went over it with the fiberglass and then strike in the fiberglass, but we have time, so pre-fill it. And then while the mud's still wet, I'm going to follow through with my fiberglass mesh tape. I know everybody out there wants to use this type of tape, this new and improved type tape. Just use fiberglass mesh tape for drywall repairs. You won't have any issues. You're not trying to learn how to use something new. I know a lot of people you see at the store, there's paper tape. You would not use paper tape on repairs. Just use a fiberglass mesh tape. A fiberglass mesh tape will get a good seal and you won't have any issues. Sometimes if you use a paper tape and you don't get enough mud behind it, you're going to get blisters and stuff. And you don't want to do a bunch of mud work, texturing and everything, and then you get blisters because you cheaped out and used some paper tape. Paper tape's used more for angles or for larger projects where they have to use a taping tools like a bazooka or a banjo for hand taping, fire taping, just larger projects when we use paper tape. New builds, room additions, anything with 5, 10, 100 sheets of drywall. Then you would use paper tape when you're using taping tools. But for repairs, just stick to the fiberglass. Doesn't have any issues. But you see that the mud's still wet, my pre-fill, and I'm just going right over all the joint seams with the fiberglass. And then I'm following through with my 6-inch knife, taking off the extra mud, pushing the tape down. It's getting that mud pushed through the crevices of the mesh. We got the pre-fill in the gaps, so this is a perfect way of doing a fiberglass mesh tape. You could also do it with joint compounds, but with the joint compound, you're just going to have to let the pre-fill dry overnight. You don't want to pre-fill it with joint compound and then turn around and coat over it because it's going to crack out. So you're going to have to let your pre-fill set up before you do any coat over it. We're working with hot muds. Like I said, it's more professional grade, so we're able to work with it. This is a backsplash. It's going to get covered with cabinets on the bottom part, cabinets on top. They're going to do a tile backsplash, so it's going to cover a lot of it. So when they tile it with their mortar and their new tile design, it's going to cover a lot of it. So they don't need this to be perfect, smooth wall. They just need one coat, maybe 2 coats on it. We're going to just do a 1 coat, heavy 1 coat on it, then we're going to slick it out, then just touch up any rough, deep spots. That way it's tile ready for the guy. Any gaps you have, larger gaps, just pre-fill it. Use a heavier mud and just pre-fill those gaps. There's no need to cut out all this sheetrock here with this 1-inch strip. I'm just going to pack it in the mud, trowel it down to get it inside the gaps and the grooves of everything, and then follow through with the fiberglass mesh tape. So I got everything fiberglass, pre-filled, ready to go to coat. Since I already still have some mud in my pan, I'm just going to go ahead and use it up on this part, doing a first coat. Just to use up my mud. I have a full pan of mud here. I'm not going to waste it. This material gets expensive when you're buying bags and bags and bags of it. So I try not to waste any materials, especially the hot mud, because it's already mixed up. The joint tape underneath is not fully set up, but it's okay because I'm going over it with hot mud. It's not like a joint compound that's going to crack out because it's still wet. It's going to set up all at the same time, and then we're just going to slick it out, and it's going to set up like a strong cement. Once your pre-fill and everything starts setting up, now you're ready for a first coat. Like I said on most of these videos, if you don't work with hot muds, just use a joint compound. Get everything coated nice and heavy with a joint compound. Joint compounds will have to dry overnight, and then you can turn around and sand it and then do a second coat. Let it dry, sand it, do another coat, so on and so on. You just keep coating it, tighter coats in between coats, tighter and tighter, tighter, until you get the perfect smooth wall that you desire. Since this is just getting tiled, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's all going to get covered up with the heavy tile anyways. So we're just going to get it all coated up. I used up my pan of mud here, so now I'm going to mix up an actual bucket of mud. If you mix hot muds, if you do decide to use a hot mud, just be warned, this is a 20-minute, so it might set up on me in 10 minutes. It ain't going to actually give you 20 minutes. 20 minutes means you need to have the mud on, all your tools cleaned up, and back on the walls, ready to slick out within 20 minutes. Sometimes it sets up a few minutes before, sometimes a few minutes after. Depends on your water. Sometimes waters have more chlorine. Dirty waters, it changes the set time. So with this, I'm using a 20-minute. If you're not comfortable mudding, I can't say this enough, just use a joint compound. I'm just showing you our technique because we have to finish this job in one trip. If you got nothing but time, you can use a joint compound. The beauty with joint compounds, if you make a mistake, you can sand away your mistakes. With a hot mud, you can sand it, but it's like sanding cement. So you get what you pay for with these hot muds. They set up like a cement. That's why it's a hot mud. It chemically sets. With this, we're just going to mix a good half a bucket of mud. That way we can just get all the materials on. No more mixing pan by pan because we're going to go through at least 4 or 5 pans here. And we're just going to get this whole thing coated out with some 20-minute mud. That way it's all done, cleaned up, and ready to go. Once we get it all coated up, we're just going to let it set up. about 20 minutes. We're going to check on it. If it's still wet, then we're going to check on it a few more minutes later. We're just going to keep checking on it until it sets up, and then we're going to turn around and slick it out. With these hot muds, you can't just put on the mud and walk away and call it a day. You have to wait till the hot mud's set up, and you have to slick them out before you call it a done deal. If you don't slick it out, it's going to set up like cement, and it's going to be really rough and ugly. So that's why we do the slick out technique. That's why it's a more professional grade material. But this is a basic video. Removing a backsplash, adding new sheetrock, getting it all taped with a nice coat on it. If I wasn't going to do a tile on this or something else, I would just probably finish it off with the second coat. If I was going to leave it perfect smooth, I'd probably follow through with a third coat or even a fourth coat if I didn't plan on doing a new tile backsplash. But this is pretty much most common issue. This one was easiest, of course, because there's no cabinets in the way. It gets a little more trickier when you're trying to cut out sheetrock in between cabinets and mud all that. It takes a little more time. But yeah, it's the most common job we do in kitchens. In my kitchen, I don't have a tile backsplash. The only reason I don't have one because I've removed so many tile backsplashes that I know that this style today is not going to be the style tomorrow that I want. So even in my own personal house, when I first moved in here, I removed my old backsplash, and then I decided to do some old mosaic type backsplash. And about 7 years later, I had to remove it all and cut it out. So now my wall backsplash is actually smooth wall drywall. And now I'm tempted in doing another backsplash, but I'm going to hold up on that because I know the process involved. So if you are planning on doing a backsplash, this is the process. If you do change your mind and you actually rip it out, or down the road you decide to sell the house or do a kitchen remodel, this is what you're going to have to do. Big project, costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time, but as you see here, we did it all right, but it is still a big messy project. Hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe on kitchen backsplash removal and mud and first coated.